Hi, Allie. Welcome to the Revitalize Womanhood Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here because, like I was just sharing with you today, that for some reason it was in the air at the gym class today that all of the women were talking about somatic breath work. So I was buzzing because I was so excited to be able to say, well, I get to go home and record with a specialist. So I will do
Oh,
my best to get as many of these questions answered because it is one of those things where I feel like I'm totally new to this, which I'm not. I have done a somatic breathing class. So I'm not totally new, but I am. I'm pretty much, you can just talk to me like I know nothing about it, and that would be so helpful because then we can meet other people where they are and help educate as much as we can. So would you please just
beautiful.
start by introducing yourself to my listeners?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and so excited to talk about this topic because it's something that I'm so passionate about and find so much value in. And so I am what I call a soul alignment specialist. So I work with women in particular, although I've worked with men as well, but working to create more alignment within their life. And really, that comes down to creating more connection with self. And through many different modalities, I incorporate somatic therapy, different somatic techniques, parts work, quantum and intuitive healing practices. And all of it is really intended to create some awareness around what is keeping you outside of your center point, outside of your truest, most pure alignment with self, and where we can bring more understanding, love, awareness, and compassion into your life and your connection with self to find more peace, more of your power, more fulfillment, and more joy. So,
I actually wrote soul alignment specialist here because specifically, you just reminded me, I want for you to please give me what you feel like your definition of alignment is. Because up until this point, I feel like it is, let me compare it a little bit with balance. This whole holy grail of up here on this pedestal of I will find balance in my life. I will find balance, right? And it's like is there such thing as balance? I don't think, and I actually just said it to my women in my community yesterday, is I don't believe in balance because nothing is perfect. Like you can't have things perfectly balanced because on this side your home life isn't like 20 pounds, and on this side, if you want to, and your work life is 20 pounds and they balance, it's like you give more to your home life or do you give more to your work life? And so they're never balanced, but I think where we find the balance is where you come to peace with those things, where you come to peace with how those things interact. And that is what we're looking for, is the balance. So with you, I'm sure you have a beautiful definition of what you call alignment.
yeah, I love that. I love that because I'm a Libra and I'm always seeking balance, but I've really had to reckon with that. What you're describing, the sort of the perfectionism that comes in the process of finding quote unquote balance. And I think especially as women, we judge ourselves so much when we feel like we're out of balance. We are, business owners, we're mothers, we're partners, we're friends, we're family members. And when one area or aspect of life is out of balance, it can create so much judgment and so much, even a sense of failure, and that idea of balance is it's something that I really don't utilize that language anymore because I feel like it's more sort of mental, it's more mentally focused, it's more cerebral, it's sort of intellectualizing the different aspects of our lives and like you said, giving them weight and expecting everything to be equal. And that's just simply not true. We go through waves and we go through these experiences that kick us out of our balance, out of our center point in order to come back more connected, more resilient, more strong, more understanding and truly more connected to self. So I feel like when I talk about alignment, it's more about the connection to self and feeling like you have that connection, that awareness around all the many parts that we have, and feeling like regardless of what you navigate in life, we're always out of balance. That's chaos creates so much beauty, right? So it's kind of nice to be out of balance at times and to experience the ebb and the flow, but the alignment doesn't change, and when we can find that alignment, when we can find that connection to self, when we can really harness the beauty that's found in that space, the compassion, the forgiveness, the self-love, then regardless of what we experience and what's out of balance, we don't have so much judgment around it, So I feel like
Yes.
my definition of alignment, and really the soul alignment piece, is all about feeling connected on a soul level to this human experience and to who we are in this physical form and who we are in this body, and how we can really stay in alignment with that in order to feel everything we're meant to feel. And also in order to feel in our highest expression, connected to our adult self. So there's a lot, I feel like there's a lot that goes into it, but it's, if you've ever experienced feeling in alignment, it might feel like you're in flow with life, that things are sort of falling into place, that you are, it's not void of challenge, right? Or void of adversity, but it's your ability to sort of navigate that, feeling more resourced, feeling more regulated, is really where the alignment comes in. So it's not making sure everything externally is in its place, or that that your kids feel, that you're doing the perfect job being a mom, and that your partner feels loved and attuned to. But it's really about, as long as I'm staying in alignment, as long as I'm staying connected to self and listening to the cues, listening to my intuition, then whatever I navigate, I know I'm doing it in an aligned way. I know I'm doing it and expressing from my highest self.
Okay. And yes, and that's where you will be moving forward each day into a better practice of this, because you're feeling it as you go through it. I like that you said also that when you fall, we sort of feel out of balance is when we're dipping our toes into uncomfortable situations. But that's absolutely where growth happens. That's absolutely where you're expanding what you are. And then you come back to a place and bring it with you. You bring it with you. So you kind of have to reset. Now I'm this person, which would affect us in our different seasons as well, because at one point you have young children. Well, at another point you don't. You have teenagers. At another point, they're out of the house. You have to find that center. You have to rediscover what that center is in every different. I mean, really, if you want to get specific with women, it's 4 times a month. You have to find that center. So I'm talking about it in big seasons because it's easy to talk about, but also you have to find it multiple times. So it is a practice. So forgive me, if I stay very much specific to somatic and the benefits in breath work and training and practice of that, please take me into different things that you also incorporate, because I just don't know about them. So I don't know to ask about them, because I am absolutely unfamiliar. So I will start with the number one question. What initially drew you to somatic breath work and this practice?
Beautiful. Well, I don't actually practice somatic breath work. I practice somatic healing. So
somatic healing. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And and really what somatic means, soma is the body. So what any somatic practice is a practice focused on the physical body. And it just means that we're taking into consideration the intelligence of the body and what we hold within the body that creates memory, the traumas, the memories that are stored in the body and the fascia and the muscles and tissues. And it places an importance on processing those memories, processing those traumas, and processing those experiences through the physical form so that we can release and once again come back into alignment. And alignment, really kind of can be described through a somatic lens as regulation. When we feel like we're in a space of regulation, we are able to access our higher adult self. When we're dysregulated, we're in an inner child loop, we're in an inner child state. So really what we're looking for is healing through the body in any somatic practice. And breathwork's just a modality within that. So it's a way to process density data, stored information within the body. And it's really powerful. And depending on the type of breathwork, there's many different types. Pranayama has been a practice for thousands of years, and that's essentially breathwork. And I'm not trained in breathwork. I do practice some on my own. I utilize some with my clients, but I'm not a specific lineage trained breathwork practitioner. But it is one way to move emotions and store data through the body. So it's an incredible practice, and I do utilize it in my own healing. But what really drew me to deeper into the body, essentially, is that I was hitting these roadblocks in my healing journey. I would move through, I went through a divorce at 30 years old, literally on my 30th birthday. Everything exploded, and I was like, I have to come to the realization that I want to move out of this marriage. And it was such a point of dissolution within my life, but it was also such an incredible opportunity for me to return back to myself, in a way that I had really not had access to in my adult life. And so from that point on, I went to this, really deep healing journey. Essentially, I was sort of on a mission looking for the ways in which I could understand myself in a deeper way. I could heal my past experiences. I could find more alignment within my life. I could find more flow, more happiness, more joy. And looking around, I realized so many of the people I was surrounded by were in a similar place, but they would reach these certain thresholds in their healing. So I would do these, I would do big shamanic journeys, or I would do, I would work with different practitioners, and I would do my own deep work. And it wasn't until I went through a really significant experience, when was that? I guess 2020. I mean, that was a big year for everyone, I think. But for me, I had this experience of this breakup that was really traumatic for me. And it sort of like rocked me down to my survival systems, down to my root chakra, down to my core, really. And it was hard for me to understand why, because I had gone through so much in my life. I had had these really significant challenges. I'd had really big surgeries as a child. There were things that, I had navigated with, not with ease, but sort of with more ease than what I was experiencing within this breakup. And I started working with a somatic practitioner, and she was specifically a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I'd only been to traditional therapy up until that point. I'd been practicing. I'm trained in shamanic and intuitive and quantum healing. So I was practicing all of those modalities, and they would really help a lot, but I would fall back into this loop, this fear loop, this loop of anxiety, this loop of, sort of contraction, and trying to find something that was safe, within my life. Like, I would really lean on certain things as a coping mechanism, and I just felt like I would reach these thresholds, these expansion thresholds, and then I would fall back into a loop. And it wasn't until I started working with this practitioner and where things really started to change. And she would just simply hold space. There wasn't a lot of discussion. There wasn't a lot of talking. It was simply a way for my body to be held and to express what it needed to move the charge through without needing all of these verbal cues or needing to talk about it to death or needing to really dig into it. It was just sort of a space for my body to speak. And what I realized is that we really have so few opportunities in this life to allow our bodies to speak, to naturally express, because we are animals, we are mammals, we are animals. And in the animal realm, if you notice a dog, for example, when it experiences a shock or a trauma, or maybe another dog runs up and, knocks it over or, snips at it. And then if you watch the dog, it almost always within a few seconds shakes. And what it's doing is it's really releasing a charge. It's releasing this adrenaline, this anxiety, this activation that pulled through its body, which is a natural process that all animals experience. And these processes are survival processes, and they're installed within us to keep us alive, to keep us safe. As humans, we become disconnected from those processes because we are conditioned to fit into society. We are conditioned that, expressing is wrong, having big emotions is wrong. We are, especially as women, really encouraged to sort of zip up and to not be overly emotional, especially in this more masculine framework that we live within. And so this is part of this disconnection from self. We've split off in so many ways from our center point, from our ability to just express honestly and authentically what we're experiencing in the present moment. So what happens is we go through these traumatic events in our lives, and it could be, a shock trauma where maybe you were in a car accident, or maybe, you were dropped as a child, or you had a surgery, something significant happened physically. Or it can be complex, trauma that occurred over a long period of time. And it could be attachment trauma, things that occurred within your family dynamic. But regardless, these traumas get stored because it doesn't feel safe for us to express in the moment the charge, the emotion, the fear. So we stuff it and store it down. A lot of times we don't have the support to actually process it. And so all of this is stored in our bodies. And when we experience challenge, in our present day, so, for example, if you experience, if you have some attachment trauma or some complex trauma around abandonment, for example, when you go through a breakup with someone who you really trusted, you really felt strongly about, and it resonates with that same abandonment trauma from early on, it puts you in the response of that experience. So you're actually living that experience in the present moment. And it's confusing for your body and your subconscious, for your nervous system, to really differentiate between what's happening and what has happened. So we have, I don't know if that makes sense, but we have all of these loops that are running all the time that are based upon past data and past experiences. So what somatic healing intends to do is to provide space for you to bring healing through the physical body, to release those charges, to let go of the old, stuck, stored trauma, emotions, data held within the body, so that you can return to the present moment and to regulation and to alignment. And that's really where we find peace, what you were describing before, like the peace that you feel when anytime you can, sit down, and maybe you're sitting down in nature and you're relaxing and you feel your entire body softening and you feel this overwhelming sense of peace come over you. That's your body signaling to you that it's safe. That's your body saying, oh, okay, we can move into rest and digest because we aren't being chased, or we're not experiencing an abandonment, or we're not, threatened by something in particular. So being human is weird because we're animals, but we have, this evolved consciousness and these systems and these, societal systems and these programs that run that tell us that we should be less of the animal. So
I just got emotional. I have a pot blood vessel, so I'm sorry if I look like Frankenstein a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
But you were explaining that, and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know the last time I felt that way. I did not recognize it if it did. I brushed past it or blew by it or moved on to the next thing. So I'm like, when was the last time I felt that? Because we are constantly, I've talked about this before too, is we're constantly in fight or flight. Women, because my audience is women are finding that they have to categorize their self-worth and how they love themselves by how much they're getting done. they wear this I'm busy as a badge of honor. This hustle culture. It's like, if I don't, I've actually had a woman say to me, if I can't prove to my husband that I've been getting XYZ done all day, he will look at me like, what have you been doing all day? Do you know what I mean? And that is
Yeah.
our culture. That is absolutely our culture. I have lived in other countries where this is so far not the truth and not their culture. Like I kind of joke about the fact that I had a hard time recording podcast episodes while I was over there. I was trying to be everything. Here is a perfect example. I was trying to be everything. I was trying to have it all. I was trying to record podcast episodes and have my meetings with my community, and while at the same time be in these amazing places where I should have been shutting off every external noise, all of the external chaos, and just really focusing in on my family and myself and where we were and the situations we were in and enjoying those experiences. But because we are so programmed to be constantly looking for the next thing, or what do I need to do next, or why can I not sit here and enjoy this? You know, we don't think about it that way, and we're constantly moving on to the next things. But so anyway, I was joking about I couldn't record a lot of times because the Wi-Fi was horrible. It was nowhere near. And you don't think about that because it's such a modern day. You don't think that in the UK or in Europe, your Wi-Fi is going to be horrible. I mean, other than like really remote places, right? But in big cities like Rome or Tuscany, I mean, you don't think about it like that. You think they're going to have the normal exactly like we do, but they don't, because they don't care about it, because they are so connected with nature, their families, themselves. They live in these, let's take a break from work, let's bring our kids home from school, let's all have lunch together, right? Let's relax, let's be with each other. And then later tonight when we have dinner, it's going to take 4 hours because we don't want grandma or mom stressing over the stove. When really here in our culture, I don't eat with my family. I mean, honestly, I'm cooking and then I'm getting them fed. And then by the time I actually sit down, if my food is warm, that's a 1. And if my family is still even eating, that's a 2. You know, it's like, think about all of these things. And so when you said that, I'm the person who has just traveled the last 7 years in different countries. So I should have a ton of these I'm at peace moments, and I couldn't even identify that feeling.
Yeah.
I don't even think I had it with this last baby, because that's the first thought that came to my mind was, well, of course I have it when I have my babies. Of course, when I'm nursing them and but this last baby, it was such trauma and such, like everything that you can think of that went wrong into a emergency C-section, and then postpartum depression. So it's like, I never experienced that. So I'm thinking back on, when have I had that feeling?
Yeah.
And I wonder if all of these women listening, I would encourage you to kind of think on that too, like kind of sit in this for a minute and let that really roll through you. When was the last time that you actually felt, because we are constantly living in a state of fight or flight, but we don't think about it because it's what we've created as our natural normal. So
Exactly.
our bodies just do it.
Exactly. And thank you so much for sharing that. And you're certainly not alone. I work with so many women who express very similar, feelings. And I lived very much that way, all through my 20s. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why. I think that we have, a hustle culture, and, our country is sort of built on opportunity, and it's beautiful, right? But there's also so much that we're missing when we focus only on production and proving our self-worth through what we do, and what we create, and our output and our productivity. And there are a lot of societal programs that go into that as well, feeling like, number one, being a mother and being a wife and all of those things that are extremely important often aren't seen as jobs, which they are. And so there's so much programming for one. But then on top of it, we've become so used to living in fight or flight, like you've described. And I would describe that as an elevated state of within our nervous system, an activation. And so when we're living in that space all the time, we aren't digesting our food properly. We aren't finding that sense of peace, calm, joy, where we can sit and our bodies actually say, oh, we aren't being chased. And it brings the question up, like, what's chasing us? And I think a lot of times we are the ones chasing us, which is really interesting when you think about it that way. It's our fears of not being enough are what are chasing us. Our fears of not being good enough, not being successful enough, not being a good enough mom, a good enough wife, a good enough friend, a good enough daughter, all of those things. And that's why you really have to begin at the center point and look at, what is my relationship to myself? Because even if you do have a husband who's like, what the heck did you do today? Like, did you just sit around on the couch? Number one, that's, probably, you could bring that into couples counseling maybe. But,
I was going to say, that's an episode for another day.
Exactly. But even if that's not the case, there's probably an internal program running that's saying, if I don't do everything perfectly, or if I'm not constantly distracting myself from dropping into this space, then there's a threat coming. So it's interesting because in many ways, the reasons why we cope and why we use substances or caffeine or exercise or even like these very subtle, sneaky ways to cope with the fact that we don't want to be present with ourselves. And when you're in a busy lifestyle too, there's a lot of reasons to run from yourself. There's so many reasons to not, carve out that alone time to just sit alone with your tea at your altar or on your couch and just listen to what's coming up. And that was me for so long. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified of spending time alone. And it wasn't until I realized that I had to carve out that space to just get quiet, I started hearing all of these voices, and the voice of my inner child, which was saying, I feel abandoned. I feel like I'm never good enough. I feel like I'm always chasing something, always looking for something to fill a void. And I think in many ways we live in that fight or flight because we're running from ourselves, and running from all the things that are stored in our bodies that we don't want to face because we've become really good at suppressing them. We've become really good at surviving and moving through. And I know so many women, particularly like my mother's age and, their 60s and 70s, who are survivors. They've been through a lot and they've moved through. They're so resilient. Survivors. Literal. Yeah. But they hit a space where they're not finding what's beyond survival. So when we're in fight or flight, we can't really feel joy. We can't feel peace because our systems aren't set up for it, right? They're literally running or fighting the threat. And so when we can drop into a space of peace, it means our systems are regulated. It means that we've found peace within ourselves. And so there's a lot of different ways to approach that. And I'll go into those in a moment. But I think another part of this too is that our world is overstimulating. And exactly what you were saying, that in many other countries, we don't have the Wi-Fi buzzing all the time like it is here. We don't have this, this expectation that we're constantly on our phones. We're constantly connected to social media. We have to post every day. We have to respond to every single text message that comes in, or email or phone call. And when you start to really listen to your center point, listen to your inner child, listen to what your intuition is really asking for, it's probably not wanting to do a lot of those things, Right. And so the overstimulation of our world now is unprecedented. our nervous systems are wired for 10,000 years ago. We're wired to be hunters and gatherers. We're wired to live in tribes. And so when you take that system and put it in 2024, we are overstimulated with data. We're learning about wars in other countries minute by minute that we can't do anything about. We are inundated with terrible trauma and traumatic events occurring all over the world all the time. We are getting judged consistently and constantly, minute by minute on social media. It is a complete and utter overstimulation for our nervous systems. Our nervous system's jobs are literally to interpret threat and to keep us alive. And so when we feel into all of the information and data that's coming in, our systems are interpreting that as a threat. And so it's a lot. So that's why it's really important to number one, just have awareness around it. What am I experiencing in my physical body right now? Do I feel this sense of urgency or this pull to, go clean the kitchen, or this pull to grab my phone? There's something that you're avoiding in that space, and right. Oftentimes the return to self it can be really quick. It can be a very significant shift, but that can happen quickly. So that's why I love somatic healing, is because it's a way to quickly return to the center so that you can start to experience joy, peace in your body once again.
Like when you were talking about the threats, and immediately I'm thinking, so I kind of did find, I was bragging to some of my friends that I kind of did find a little bit of what we're referring to as that peace and alignment I had a really busy day on Tuesday, whatever. But it was planned out perfectly. Like I gave myself time. I always am coaching on time management and using your planners and like leaving yourself time in between, like your emergency fund of time, right? Because things happen. Well, so I did. I had my day planned according to that kind of a thing. Well, then you don't think about the totally uncontrollable things, like with your kids, and this happens and that happens and the morning's completely thrown off. So my whole motto for that day was, I'm just 30 minutes behind. I am 30 minutes behind on everything. It started here, but then it turned into here, but then it turned into here. I had to cancel a call. I had to cancel a babysitter didn't show up, so I had to cancel a recording. I mean, you know what I mean? And if I hadn't been mindful in those moments, if I hadn't been drawing myself back to mindfulness and awareness of, okay, chaos is happening. It is my choice to decide whether or not I care that chaos is happening, because my kids were late, but not late for school. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm so used to being there early. They weren't late. They were just late for our standards. So I let it slide. It was fine. I just kind of let it wash over me. And the next thing, I canceled a call because I thought to myself, I actually went back to my friend Elizabeth Faye. We recorded together. She's beautiful. You would love her. You two would connect so well. But she talked about this exact thing where she's like, I know my cycles and I know where I'm at in my month, and I'm in my body enough to know that I will not record a podcast episode when I'm in a certain time of my cycle. Like I just won't. I know I'm going to feel needy. I'm going to feel yucky. I'm going to feel, and that's not when I want to be my most creative. But when I can wake up and dance and move and I'm feeling creative, those are the days that I want to create, and I do it. So schedule be damned. Those are the days I'm going to do, because that's what my body's telling me I need to do. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, we live on different planets. Okay. We need to hang out more because we live on completely different planets. But in that day, in those moments, she resonated with me. She connected with me and brought me back to myself, because I was like, I feel too rushed to have this call. My babysitter didn't show up. I do not want to record an episode and waste time and disrespect this person because I have a 3-year-old coming in, and it's fine. It's fine. It will all be okay. And I was so proud of myself for those situations and being present-minded enough to say, why do I need to be so stressed out when these things happen? What's the fear of the consequence. What consequence? I'm a grown woman. I control my own consequences. Like, what? What
Yeah.
consequences? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's so, I think what I love doing with people is sitting down with them and we go through what is the activation in the present moment? Like, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? And there's typically an emotion. For you, it might have been panic or fear, but there's always there's a root to that. There's
Right.
something beneath that. And it's typically not anything to do with the other people involved, right? It's almost
Right.
always due to an experience occurring within you. And so I love that you were able to identify that and to move through that experience and to say, there's beauty in chaos. And my life is chaotic right now because I have children that depend on me. Children are unpredictable. Other beings are unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. And I can't fit everything into these perfect boxes, And that is a space where I feel like where you can access self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-love. It opens the door to deepen into the experience that you're having, deepen into the emotion you're having, and finding the little young part of you that feels like she needs to hold everything together, otherwise she's a failure, you know?
Right.
And it's so interesting because what I've learned is that I integrate parts work or internal family systems into my work as well, because I see, the journey of life is that we are made up of many parts, and these parts are old, young parts. So they're younger parts of us that have experienced certain things, certain traumas or emotions at ages where we didn't have the capacity to really fully process them. So these traumas or these memories are held, similarly, they're held in the body, they're also held in our psyche, they're held in our subconscious, and those are what run the show. And when we look at that, we can say, well, in this present moment, like, what part of me is running the show? Is it my higher self who says and knows that timing is everything, and that that I will be guided to record this when it's the perfect time? Maybe the other person has something going on where it wasn't a right time for them too. That's your higher self. That's your adult self that says, like, I know I'm not perfect, and if I try to be, I'm gonna lose my mind,
Right.
because the inner parts, the younger parts, and the physical body is experiencing something completely different. They're experiencing this as life or death. And if you don't keep everything together, something falls apart. Especially when we experience traumas, early on in infancy and even up till age 3, we're so reliant upon our parents' nervous systems that when we experience a disconnect from self, it feels like death. And so much of what occurs within our lives it feels like life or death, even if we can't identify it in that moment. So that's why we have anxiety. That's why we have, fears around things that are, maybe not super rational. But all of this is just information, and all of it's okay. And it's beautiful to acknowledge the feminine aspect of us, which is chaotic and comes in waves and comes in cycles, and the masculine part, which really would like to keep everything tidy and in order and contained and sort of predictable, and find the balance between those two, And it sounds like you are with, scheduling in breaks and pauses in your day, but that sense of peace, that sense of flow, that surrender, that letting go you're describing is found when we acknowledge that we've hit our capacity and that we need to just truly let go, that we can't control everything. And I feel like so much of our suffering on this planet during this time is due to trying to control and to grip to everything, to make everything perfect, to make sure everyone likes you, to, make sure your kids are okay, to make sure you're being the best parent or the best wife or partner. And that will lead to suffering because it's not possible,
Right. I
Yeah.
think that there's a real reckoning coming. I think it's already here. I think I actually discussed this on a previous episode with another gal, and we were talking about this whole new like organize your life, right? Everybody, this feels like it's such a thing right now, is declutter, organize, which is great. I'm not saying, I mean, I'm doing it. That's my goal this year. But she said, she made the statement that she has had the same no spending year. No, she's not spending for the year. She's done it 3 years in a row. Because I said, yeah, I saw that. And all of a sudden I was like drawn to you. And she's like, everybody was this year. I've done it 2 years previous. Didn't have any attention. Didn't have anyone talk to me about it. And now for some reason I did it in January and she went viral. And now it's like, and she says, I think there's a reckoning because we are all finally realizing that we've had enough of the external chaos that we're being bombarded with. You know what I mean? And even what you were talking about, some things that like digestive problems and sleep problems and these things, these issues that we're having physically, but now we're looking for things like you said, we're looking for ways to medicate or, you know, because it's like, oh, it's maybe I need to have my hormone therapy done. Maybe I need more magnesium. Maybe I need more whatever. Maybe I need less this or whatever. And we're trying to find all these things. It's like, okay, I don't sleep all the way through the night. Oh, maybe you need more magnesium. Or, oh, I don't do this. Maybe you need more that. And it's like, maybe you just need to quiet yourself and allow yourself to find peace in your life. That is what have you created? If you absolutely are feeling like the laundry is attacking you, the laundry pile on the floor that I see every day makes me feel like I'm in fight or flight mode. Do you know what I mean? That's such a stupid statement, but I know every mother that just heard me say that is like, yes, but it's not the laundry. The laundry is not attacking me. I'm not in fight or flight from the laundry, but I am in fight or flight from I'm going to look like a bad wife, or I'm going to look like a bad mother, or I'm going to be judged because my house isn't clean. I'm going, you know, it's this internal struggle because of the external chaos. Gosh, it's insane. This is so interesting. You are like blowing my mind here. And I'm like, I'm getting I'm getting my free coaching from you right now. And I'm loving every minute of it.
Of course.
So if speaking of that, if someone comes to you, you get me, type A, like wound way too tight, trying really hard to break out of all of this. Where do you begin? Where do you even start?
Yeah. Well, I'm very familiar with that because I was that. So I understand it intimately. And I typically work with people who, you know, have lived similar experiences as me. And so where we typically begin is creating space for nothingness. And that is where everything turns on, because our desire to create more chaos, because a lot of this is self-created. You know what I mean? Like we take on more because we are trying to prove to ourselves that we're worthy, that we're good, that we're worthy of having the home that we have, the family that we have, the blessings that we have. And so carving into your day, it depends on each person, but a period of time where you are doing nothing but being. And it would blow your mind what comes up in that space. You know, if you're just sitting with a cup of tea, or you're, you know, there's no sound, there's no music playing, there's no, you know, mantras, nothing. It's just you and yourself. And it's within that space where we begin to hear and we begin to peel back the layers of our experience in this present moment. And we get to feel the experience within our physical bodies. Some of us, you know, have pain that we've had for years and years and years, and we've never been able to identify what it is. And we go from chiropractor, acupuncturist, doctor, you know, supplements, all the things. And sometimes when I work with women and we allow the body to show us what the message is within that pain, it will release within seconds, you know? And it's remarkable because it's when we have that space to just listen, to be present with our experience, to, to love and bring compassion to that space, it says to that part of us, and it says to that emotion or that inner child or the program, the messaging that we have looping, it says, you're okay. And I love you exactly as you are. And I accept you, because essentially all of this, everything we're talking about, is at the root and at the core a disconnection from self, and our physical plane, our reality, our external reality is a reflection of what we have going on internally. And so if we look around and we see chaos and we are overwhelmed, it's because we're experiencing a disconnection from self somewhere, where we weren't able to say no to this thing, or we weren't able to acknowledge our capacity or our threshold within a certain space to know what is in alignment and what isn't within our lives. So when we find alignment internally with ourselves and we start to connect to our intuition and we hear the yeses and the nos, everything shifts externally as well. Our children shift, our relationships shift. You might notice that, if you're having behavioral issues with a child, I invite every person to look at what's happening internally within their own system. Are they in fight or flight all the time? Because what's happening is you're communicating that with your child, that something isn't safe. And as they're looking to you to be the regulator and their sort of gauge as far as safety within the world, and they feel your system dysregulated, they're going to have that internal experience too. So it's incredible, but I truly believe, especially as women, because we are the center of our family units, we hold so much power in shifting our reality just by creating more intimacy with self, and so to answer your question, I typically, encourage women to create some space just to get into the layers, to listen to what's occurring, to hear the messages. I know every woman's intuitive. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't hear anything, spend more time and you will, I promise you. And then from there, we typically go into, okay, what's the message? What is the root of it? I incorporate quantum and intuitive healing into that. So we're doing a lot of hypnosis, diving into the subconscious, working with the physical sensations within the body. And then from there, we're working really, really intimately with the part that feels that emotion or that disconnection, that activation. And so a lot of reparenting, inner child work. So I kind of have a whole process, but along with that too, I work with astrology because I think it's really helpful to know that we're all wired differently. And we all are here to have different experiences. And some people, like you said, are more type A, some are not. And self-acceptance and radical self-love can go a long way. So yeah, I tailor my work really specifically to each client, but I've noticed through the years that there's kind of a formula, that we typically follow, which is beginning with space.
I'm trying to think of how to make this a question because it was an experience. But I'm really hoping that in this conversation and out of this episode, we get some answers for these women that are listening, for a place for them to even just begin to be curious, right? And you've started that with quiet. Find quiet within yourself and just listen for the messages. But so for me, I did one somatic breathwork session. So specifically breathwork, you pointed out somatic is the healing or, the body, and the breathwork was the modality. And it was like, I completely blocked it. I don't know whether it was because who I am or because of the situation or whatever. I completely blocked it. I really wanted it. I wanted to let it work, but it wasn't. I wasn't expecting it. I gave myself anxiety over it. The feelings that your body goes into when this is happening to you, I didn't like it. And so my body just was completely blocking everything that was allowing this release. So I am going to continue because now I know what to expect a little bit and hopefully I can break through that. But that being said, in these moments when we're quieting ourselves and listening for these messages, is there a way to help release that blockage without, a practitioner or a coach or something, some way that it's like, you obviously have to feel safe. You obviously have to feel vulnerable, allowed to do it. So you've got to create a scene where this is a safe space. But is there something else I'm missing that can be like some kind of help to letting that energy out?
Yeah.
Or trauma, call it a
I
trauma.
love that question. Breath work it can be quite aggressive in nature. And I mean,
It was very aggressive.
there are many different types of breath work too, but it's not necessarily the right modality for all traumas. There are some traumas, especially I notice this for high functioning women who are type A, who are, like I said, high functioning, successful, really good at being in their masculine, and really good at achieving. When we approach healing in that same sort of way, where we want to just like break through and achieve that key, you know what I mean? That key to healing, that space that says, okay, I've released this trauma, it will almost always get blocked. So it's, if you think about like a screw, it's almost like trying to turn the screw in the opposite direction. So I always say if there's a trauma around, I mean, for one thing, traumas are held in the body and in the subconscious because they were too overwhelming to process in the moment. And we had to process them alone, and it was easier and more safe to store them. So when we start to get close to a trauma, we'll notice that there's dissociation around the trauma, which is protective, and it's there to keep us safe. And it's also why we can have trauma and be high functioning individuals and high functioning adults and wonderful mothers and partners. But that dissociation.
I'm sorry, real quick. Do you mean association? So like, for example, just so I'm understanding you correctly,
Yeah.
when something comes up, when we're allowing a situation to come in, but then our mind instantly says, no, it's fine. No, you don't need to think about that. Like something instantly shuts it down, like you're safe, it's fine. But
Yeah.
really it is in there, but it's trying to creep out, but then your brain automatically shuts it back down. So is that what
Yeah.
you mean by?
Exactly. Yeah. And dissociation can show up in many different ways. It can show up as procrastination. It can show up as avoidance. It can
Oh,
show up as,
yes.
yeah, like one of the most remarkable things is working with women who have a tendency to procrastinate because they're almost always stuck in a freeze mode. Their nervous systems are looping through the mind, and it's too overwhelming to get the physical body actually in there to accomplish what they need to. So, but yeah, exactly. Dissociation it's a protective space that separates us from the trauma. And so what you might experience when you're going into dissociation is this like shutting down. Like I used to, in therapy in my 20s, all of a sudden my vision would fog over. When I hit a threshold, when I hit something was too tender and too poignant for me, too scary. And so people experience it in different ways, but it's sort of like almost like feeling like you get booted out of it, or it fogs over, or you start to zoom out a little bit. And I would recommend, if you're moving into that space, I would highly recommend working with a practitioner and there's many different kinds, but specifically a trauma-informed somatic therapist who knows how to work with your body to soften and open as you move through the dissociation, because otherwise it can be re-traumatizing. Like, I mean, it's very possible to not make it worse, but sort of create more charge within that trauma space. So
Like creating more anxiety over, if I go and do this again, I know that there was already anxiety there and I'm scared now of feeling what I felt before. So
Yeah.
I've just created like a re-freak mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely get that. I used to have panic attacks, and I, was doing a practice one time and I experienced a panic attack within that. And so now it holds the charge of panic in that experience. And I feel like the medicine I always lean into is softening. I think it's really important to like bring in the big machinery, the big tools when at certain points in time. But I think especially for women who are this way and who are high achieving and who are, type A, it's really radical to do the opposite and to do less, you know, and to like just notice what occurs within your system when you do less, and let the trauma uncoil in the opposite direction that you would expect it to. You know, so if you're going into it with that sort of, you know, focus, like, I'm going to dominate this, you know, I'm going to like move through this, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to find the center of this trauma, and I'm going to release it. It will probably kick you out because that's not the medicine for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some plant medicine can be that way. Like, it can be really aggressive in nature because it's like going straight to the root and it's ripping it out. But I've worked with people on the other side of these experiences, a really intense breath work or a really intense plant medicine journey where there's more fragmentation now, you know? And so I think there's a lot of beauty in just giving yourself space. They always say slow with trauma. So if there's a specific trauma you have in mind, or there's a charge within your body you can feel, give yourself enough space and time to soften into it and to allow it to open for you. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ish. But I mean, with any of it, it's like you have to try it. You have to just try it and see what happens, and be mindful of, I mean, have a piece of paper there next to you for when you come to when you are done being quiet, and write down what you experienced. And it's so funny. So I have a question in here. Where is it? That is actually when you very first hear of what you do. Where is it? Here we go. How does somatic healing facilitate? No. I don't want to go there. We've been there. How does somatic healing, what are some of the common misconceptions about the practice? Because my very first experience with people who used crystals or did breath work or whatever, because I had no idea what it was, and my ignorant, I guess, uneducated mind was, this is voodoo. This is like, you know. And so but now the more I learn about it, the more beauty I see in it. And I think obviously, so the first thing is ignorance, like being educating yourself into what different practices, because they thought yoga was this way. When yoga was first introduced, it was malarkey, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what
totally.
word, I'm using words like malarkey, but whatever. So, but now it's such a embraced thing. And this is now, I believe, also becoming such a beautifully embraced thing, because again, with what I said about, we're kind of just fed up. I think there's a reckoning happening with all of us, just figuring out, like, we are done being puppets and we're going to figure things out for ourselves. And I think we're on the very beginning of this really cool trajectory.
Yeah.
And so how do you, I don't know about explain to someone that thinks of you as a voodoo practitioner, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was just looking at my chart last night and found a placement I'd sort of been looking for, because I felt this pull to the unseen realm and what was occurring outside of our vision, you know, our physical experience forever. I'd felt, you know, drawn to that. And I found a placement in my chart where it literally says that I'm here to help people with that. I'm here to break through those, you know, preconceptions and to open into the unseen. We use only a portion of our brains, and there's so much that we're upgrading and developing as we move through being human. And so there's so much happening and occurring outside of what we see with our physical eyes. There's so much of our experience that's held within the subconscious. And, you know, when we learn about the fact that our subconscious, which holds and stores memories from, you know, our earliest years, it's formed between 0 and 14. And I think actually they're finding even into our 20s now. But when we know that 95% of our reality is a projection of our beliefs about ourselves and about the world, then I feel like almost all of our experience is unseen. The majority of what we experience is actually unseen, you know, and when we think about that, then we have to approach healing in a way that is different from the traditional ways we have. And I truly believe that we've reached a point in humanity where we've hit a wall, you know, and what we've done is no longer working. And it's why Pluto's moving into Aquarius. It's why we're, you know, literally this month birthing a whole new world into existence because we need it, you know, and there's so much capacity within us as humans to evolve and grow. And that means that the way we do things has to change too. And so, and this is, you know, honestly, a lot of the practices I practice are ancient too. So they've been around, you know, for centuries, and they're extremely powerful and effective. And it's only until more of our, you know, our westernized culture has seen things strictly through a scientific lens that we've lost a lot of the ancient traditions, which are highly effective and can be merged and blended with the beautiful Western medicine and techniques we've learned and the sciences that keep developing. But the thing I love about somatic work in particular is that it is science-based. And it's a way to merge spirituality and energy with science, because we're looking at everything through the experience of our nervous system. And that's real. And we can see it. We can see the nerves running through our bodies. We can follow the vagus nerve down our body. You know, we can feel the physical experiences that we're having. And so I think that we're getting there. You know, I think we're cracking through a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of change and evolution that's happening, and we can see it reflected in, you know, the interest in healing. Like, I'm extremely busy, and I feel like that's going to continue just because there's so much that people want to heal, you know? So it's a pretty cool space to be, but I understand that it's, you know, not everyone is at that space of wanting to dive into this type of work, but I always encourage people to keep an open mind, because I've seen some of the most miraculous healing happen when we open to the potential to healing, you know, the real potential to heal.
One of my members, actually, she just was explaining something to me today that was really interesting. And she said, because we were trying to tap into like a big dream that's on our heart. What's a big dream you have? And like let's get it out and let it out. And she was talking about like 20 years ago when she was being misdiagnosed for a mental, not illness, like a situation like with an ADD or ADHD, but she was being treated as if she had depression, going to therapy, right? Whereas she said, I had this vision, this dream of why isn't there a place that I could come? Because you go to therapy and it's like, okay, thanks, your session's done, goodbye. Hopefully that worked. Hopefully we got through. See you later, bye, right? Versus imagine with our physical bodies and you get cancer. You have a team. You have a plethora of options of, you can do this treatment. We can try this treatment. We can try surgical. We can cut it, you know, like people that walk you, hold you by the hand, thankfully, you know, through these processes with these medical things. But with the brain, with the mental things, it's like all we've had thus far, from what she was explaining from her experience, was here's your therapy, hope it works, bye, you know?
Yeah.
Versus now she said that her husband is working for this clinic that's opening up that has all these different modalities included in this in your mental health wellness, right? Your mental health wellness. So they've got therapists, but they've also got practitioners. They've also got somatic healing things. They've also got, right? They've got all of these different strategies working together in one place to try to get through. Right. And so when I think about that, how you're just explaining what the debunking of what this is it is just being open to new things, because that clinic would have been frowned upon 10 years ago, right? They would have been like, it's just like anything with people that are using like new kinds of oils and new kinds of whatever. It comes into Western and we're all like, what are they doing? But it's like, this
Right.
came from a plant that has been in our, like it's literally been on this earth since the beginning of time. And here you go, you're welcome. And I think of like Aborigines that used to have to come up with these nuts that created this, that created, or, it killed or created whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, they have been around for all this time. So why do we here all of a sudden hear something new and we're like, oh, that's so wrong. Oh, that's not going to be right. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry that just resonated with me. And so it reminded me of that story she was telling me about, that now we're finally opening ourselves up to experiences and healing practices that aren't so black or white. Do you
Totally.
know what I mean?
And I actually have clients who are psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists, and they do work, with me because they know that there's something beyond our Western model. And I've had so
Cool.
many of the closest people to me go into the tunnel, the funnel of Western psychiatry and mental health. And it's a very broken system. And I mean, I've had professionals tell me that too, like their hands are tied in a lot of ways. A lot's not covered by insurance. The way the hospitals operate is very archaic and actually not supportive of, these mental health events that occur. And I've seen people I love deeply go through these funnels and come out the other side and seek alternative methods of healing, and it clicks and it works. And that's what's so beautiful about just being open to different experiences, because I've worked with clients who have been in therapy for decades and weren't able to move the dial. They were in these loops and they just were like, I can't shift this pattern that I've been in for my entire life. And we can work through that because we're open to experiencing things outside of what our mind can grasp. It expands our consciousness. And so I love that you shared that, because it's something I sit with all the time. And I really, it kind of, it eats away at me in some ways, thinking about all of the people who don't have access to healing, and they get stuck in these
Right.
tunnels and these funnels that are just, never ending. And I think a lot of our population lives that way. So I'm glad to see things are shifting and that there's more available for people, outside of just those models.
And luckily we have platforms like this that we can speak about
Yes.
it openly and we can share it, and it
Yeah.
hopefully falls on the right ears, and then they can figure out what to do with it then. But yeah, I love these platforms that allow us to share. I know in a lot of ways we like criticize them for the negativity that they create, but also they have such a powerful reach in the positive way. So
Yeah.
we have to celebrate them in that way as well.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
where can these listeners find you? Where can they come? What's the best source to get to you?
Oh. Yeah, thank you. I am pretty active on Instagram. So Ali Ofstedal is my Instagram handle, and my website has all of my offerings. I also have a podcast called Soul Archaeology, and I really deep dive into a lot of these topics and go over. I do astrological forecasts and kind of, it's almost like a weather forecast, but I'm talking about the collective energetic climate a lot, and I love that format because we can deep dive into things like we did here today. And I work with clients one-on-one. So I have a mentorship container where we spend 3 months together and really consistently, check in with one another, have deep sessions where we're doing a lot of the somatic healing, the subconscious rewiring. And I've seen incredible transformation occur within that container. So that's the most intimate way to work with me. I also offer just one-on-one sessions if you're curious, and just want to, maybe give it a shot or give it a try. That's always a beautiful place to begin as well. So
That's very
yeah,
cool. That is very cool. Thank you so much for joining me today and
thank
like
you for having
enlightening
me.
me, and hopefully a lot of my listeners, because I'm sorry you had to deal with this noob over here, but
You
I
are
hope it
wonderful.
was interesting to see how new eyes take this in, new eyes, new ears, new minds take this in.
Yeah,
Because,
it
yeah, I think
it's
it's
it
very cool.
is. And it's, yeah, I'm just so grateful. Thank you for being such a curious mind and such a, a beautiful space holder for women, because the work you're doing is really important. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Allie.